But a team that did do something amid a string of failures is Charlotte FC. So just a bit about what they've done, right? We talked about the Calvin Stangs try, the Miguel Almiron sign, failed signing, Giovanni Lo Celso failed signing, and even Jamie Vardy almost came over with Dean Smith. They ended up signing Pep Biel for their number 10 spot. They brought in Tim Ream, as we mentioned, and they are on pace to bring in Aydin Toklamadi, a 20-year-old Israeli center forward who, from what I remember, is a football manager king. You'll have to correct me there. I'm not so sure, but apparently he was super big in the potential ratings of football manager.
Looking it up right now as we speak,
Oh,
seeing what he
good.
looks like in my
We'll
database because
come.
I'm like 8 years in the future.
We'll come back to that then.
I
Uh,
could tell you Toklamati in my save, and again, it differs in every save for those who know Football Manager. Not that great.
no,
He's had like 3 or 4 transfers. He's only commanded a total of 6.6 mil, and the best team he's played for is AZ, and he only played 5 times for them. Like, although he played for Granada in La Liga, but he was mostly a sub. He only had 2 starts. So maybe he used to be big in potential, but doesn't look like he may be anymore.
yeah, could be. I just want to talk about Charlotte's last day or 2 days of this transfer window because they went. I was at work, so I'll throw that out there. I was at work and I had notifications on, of course, and Tommy Scoops is out here dropping Calvin Stangs is about to fail, but don't worry, Miguel Almiron's on the book. Okay, Miguel Almiron says thanks, but no thanks. Charlotte scrambling for a 10, trying to get a whole bunch of other things across the line. And then this Pep Biel guy comes out and it's like, okay, Pep Biel coming over on loan from Olympiacos. He's been okay kind of throughout his years. He commanded, using your phrase, commanded 11 million euros in transfer fees over the last 4 years or so. Great, whatever, right? Then you go online and you go to the announcement of Pep Biel to Charlotte, and it is just full of I don't know where these fans came from, if they were, teams that were looking to sign him and he passed up to go to Charlotte, or if they were Olympiacos fans or whatever, that are just begging him not to go to Charlotte and come wherever they wanted to go. So, I mean, I had people going in like blue checkmark people's like massive failed transfer to Charlotte FC, big unknown injury puts this move off, like do not go to don't sign him. I mean, they were so upset, which again kind of raises the expectation a little bit. And again, I think a player like this, right, a 27-year-old Spanish attacking mid, we've seen this before. Hello, paging Alejandro Pozuelo, right? Somebody like that who comes in. I didn't know who Pozuelo was when he got here. I don't think many people did, and the style of play just fit well with what they were doing. Now, this could change a little bit because of how rushed they were to get it over the line, but would be really, really interesting. I kind of hope he plays against Red Bull so I could see him in person. But man, it would be so cool if he comes in and brings Charlotte to that next level. They've been so defensively sound this season. What can he provide in the attack to unlock this team?
I feel I feel like Jose Mourinho right now. I feel like I should just be in that what's his little thing? It's like if I speak, I am in trouble. Is that because that's what I feel like right now? Because we spent the whole transfer window talking about, oh, Charlotte's going to sign Calvin Stangs, and you and I can't remember if we talked about that on air or off air, but I was stoked about that. I think that would have been probably the best signing for this league in like the last, at least probably since Messi has come in my opinion. That falls through. You talk about Miguel Almiron. I mean, that one hurt when I saw that one rumored, obviously, as an Atlanta fan, but at the same time, I recognize that he is a baller. He was super good in this league and is coming off a strong year with Newcastle. So that was going to be another great one for them. That one fell through. I didn't even know about Giovanni Lo Celso and Jamie Vardy rumors that you had mentioned as well. But I mean, Giovanni Lo Celso would have been, I think, another great signing for them. I think that would have been a phenomenal get for that number 10 spot. And then for them to kind of land on Pep Biel feels just so underwhelming compared to that. I don't want that to be a shot at Pep Biel because that's just kind of not fair to him. But I mean, to go from top talents in Europe, and I don't mean top like they're the best players in all of Europe, but like from an MLS standard, to go from top talents in Europe to a guy who couldn't get a single start for Augsburg feels a bit underwhelming. And you compared him to Pozuelo, but when I looked at Pozuelo before he came over to MLS, I mean, he was putting up double-digit goal contributions like 3 years in a row at in the Belgian league versus Beal, who's coming over with 11 games played in Augsburg, zero starts, less than 300 minutes, with the other half of the season being less than 600 minutes played at Olympiacos. So I'm not saying BL won't be successful in the league, but it just feels so underwhelming compared to what you were rumored with the entire window.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I get it. Now here's the other thing, right? If a team tries to go for one player and fails, that's usually the end of it. If they try and go for, and I mean big name players, they try to go for two big name players and fail, that's usually definitely the end of it. Charlotte didn't let the failures get in the way of them getting a higher level player in the role that they needed. Now, how does Dean Smith turn this team into utilizing a player like that? I have no idea because they've set up differently over the season. I don't really remember them using a pure out and out 10. So it'd be interesting to see how he gets on in this group. Let me correct myself here. They've been using a mixture of Brant Bronico and Nikola Petkovic, both center defensive mids on transfer market, but as more like 6'8" players, just a little bit more advanced. So I'm not saying that they'll need to even change shape, right? You just slide him right in, Vargas and Tavares on other side of him. Swiderski leads the line, you're good to go, right? Interesting to see how that fits in for sure. Just because it's been such a different group, they've never had a player like that this season. It's always been somebody who's kind of been, in my opinion, forced into that role. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, no, I think it was definitely like they found the right position to look for and try to improve. And I do 100%. I do think they improved, especially if you're saying Brant Bronico was your other option at the number 10 spot. It's probably any other natural number 10 is going to be an improvement there. But and again, I don't think Beal is destined to be bad in MLS or that he won't be successful, but it just feels very disappointing when you see the level that they were aiming for and kind of what they ended up with. It feels like you were saying like it was a last ditch resort of like we just have to get somebody in at this point.
Right. And again, this takes the whole point. Everybody's out here saying, "Oh, there's no consequences if you don't, you don't have relegation. Like, what happens if you don't sign it?" Well, here's the thing. They could have easily sat there and like, "Oh, we missed out on it. We'll try again next year and see what happens." But they didn't. They had the ambition to go and push and sign for more advanced and higher level, again, is what I'm going to use, higher level players, which is a great sign, right? Another team that was in that same mix of trying to get higher level players. I was going to say Red Bull, but I can't even joke about that. New York Red Bull, we're just here talking about them because they missed out on moves, and Connor wants to make fun of me. But differences in players, right? You got Charlotte looking at Calvin Stangs, Miguel Almiron, Giovanni Lo Celso, Jamie Vardy, like big names who are going to make big difference. And here's Red Bull looking at a chronically injured center defensive mid and a Polish second division striker. Ambition lies in the eye of the beholder is how I've always been
That's
told.
that's Red Bull's motto, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Um, Listen, so Frankie Maya went out. We were desperately thin on center mids. Gabaman, for whatever reason, was the first choice. Interesting. Not really sure about that one. Again, we've gone through the whole injured center defensive mid in Yuba Diarra, who came on loan from Salzburg, Leipzig, one of the two, and took up a DP spot and was injured the entire year. Instead, we go out and we hit on loan a designated player center mid from Gremio. Plays more in the defensive role from what it sounds like. And from what the reports are, is this guy is a perfect energy drink soccer player. He has an engine that never quits. He goes into challenges all the time. Uruguayan dude is ready to run through a wall, and I think that's what this team needs because that's what Frankie Mai was. He was all over the place, winning tackles, picking it up, advancing the ball going forward, right? If he can fill that role and be super active and super disruptive, I think we have, when healthy, the talent around that to be successful, but we need to be healthy to do it. So be one to keep an eye on for sure. Your thoughts? Your thoughts?
I feel like we kind of know what your team needs. I feel like for many years now, it's been the same thing of this team creates insane amount of chances and has nobody who can finish them. And it is a year after year problem. You have like it's like the Chelsea curse, but in MLS with when it comes to strikers. It's year after year you have strikers who cannot score. And quite frankly, I think you may have dodged a bullet on getting potentially another striker who couldn't score, bringing in the Polish second division guy on 2 million, which is insane, by the way. But yeah, I mean Dante Van Zier. I mean, say what you want about his playmaking. I'm pretty sure he's pretty high up there in assists, but he can't like he's just not scoring goals. And it's the same problem you had with Klimala, same problem you had with Barlow, same problem you had. I don't even know when the last time, probably since BWP left,
Yeah,
that
so we
you
have a whole
can't
we have a
find.
whole running list. It's very fun.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think that's what your issue is. I mean, when Forsberg is healthy again and him and Morgan are creating chances again, I feel like you need someone who's going to score goals because I mean, I just don't think you can solely rely on those two to score all your goals for you. I think it worked out in the first half of the season. I just don't think it's a long-term solution there.
I wasn't going to hit on the striker just yet. I was trying to go to the positive side of it, but yeah, listen, the disappointing part of it, and they've been quiet about it since it's happened, is this team has been saying they've been looking for another striker for the last 8 to 10 months. U22 doesn't, whatever level you wanted it to be, you've been looking for it. And in 10 months, you couldn't get a single one across the line. And the only one that was even rumored outside of the Memphis Depay, like millisecond rumor, was a second division guy from Poland who was linked with Juve for 1.5 million, whatever. That's the only one that you had lined up. And this is why I went back and was kind of praising the Beal thing was they had what looks to be just reported. I'm sure they had a lot more on the board. Four different players for the number 10 role. Lachelso, you can argue if he would have fit in there or not, whatever. And they hit on number four. We have 10 months and we get one guy who says thanks but no thanks and we end up with nothing. Like where's the preparation? Where's the scouting and the recruiting for and that's the difference between somebody whose owner is only caring about them versus being the fifth ugly stepchild in a global conglomerate, right? It's really disappointing that way. It's one of the reasons why if Red Bull decided, hey, we're going to go move on another direction if somebody else wants to buy it, all for it because it's quite clear that there is not enough focus to make this team better than it already is. And no matter how much of the lip service they give you about, oh, we care and we want to make more than just the playoffs, we want to make deep runs and win trophies, that's great. Show me, prove it to me.
Honestly, I don't even think you could use the fifth ugly stepchild argument, considering NYCFC is probably like the 10th ugly stepchild. But honestly, outside of like a couple of years, they've been a very successful team year after year. And clearly their management cares, like the parent club cares, and is willing to help with connections and bringing in exciting young players and bringing guys from the system on loan that'll make a good impact there. It's just clearly Red Bull just doesn't care. They just do not have a single care for New York Red Bulls. They care about RB Salzburg and they care about RB Leipzig, and that's pretty much it. The rest of
But
the teams can kind of like, oh, if we happen to have a good youth prospect that comes through, we'll just take him from you, and
well,
that's
and
about it.
that's what I think. Not to get too much off on a tangent here, but owner of Man City is there to break financial fair play and win trophies. Owner of Red Bull.
Had to get that one in there, didn't you?
Sorry, did I slip that? My bad. Did I say the quiet
That
part
just
out
came
loud?
out, didn't
My
it?
bad.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, I know because you're following right behind him, buddy. Mister, I'm
I
spending
don't know what
a
you're talking
billion
about.
and a half dollars to finish
We're
12th.
writing the financial fair play rules.
Get at him. Yeah, no, sorry. Everton just got docked 10 points because we talked about it.
That's true.
You got Red Bull who are like, all right, we took this team from the fifth division of Germany, worked them all the way up to the first division. We're playing against Bayern Munich, who win basically everything, but they're stupid enough to buy all of our players. So if we just have a couple of good players, we can sell it on to them and make money. right? So then we'll get those players from Salzburg. And where does Salzburg get their players from? From us. So as long as we have one or two people a year that go through the system and end up being able to be sold for something, we're doing the job. Right. And that's the difference is at the top, the very, very top. You're right. Yeah, we care about Leipzig and Salzburg. They care about City and Girona probably, but they care about those teams so they can win money, not so that they can make money. You know what I mean? Like by player sales and stuff. I think that's the different side of it. It is what
Yeah,
it
I
is.
mean,
The
I think
team
the top
matters.
teams are kind of telling of their motives. Like Man City wants to win everything every year.
Yeah,
Leipzig
so much so that they'll
said
break every
basically
rule in the book.
Leipzig, on the other hand, looks like they're just trying to make a profit every year and just sell on players.
Hmm.
So
Well, that's what
I get
happens
that.
when you're owned by a person who has the entire financial backing of an oil state versus a company that sells energy drinks. It's just a different mindset. I can't transition into FCC well from there. So FCC,
You don't always have to have a good transition.
yeah, but that would have been funny if I did, right? Like, uh,
Why don't you sell me on a move to FCC like they couldn't sell to all their failed
yeah, you're
moves?
right. We didn't need a transition. You're right. Um, so listen, we talked about FCC. You know, they were also on a list of a ton of failed moves. Weston McKennie was long rumored here. Josh Sargent last minute was rumored here. I think they made a $15 million bill or a $10 million bid that went and was rejected for being way too low. Now, granted, I don't think Josh Sargent was coming anywhere near here, but money talks, right? We mentioned the German Berterame move that didn't quite get through. And I believe they also were linked to a U22 signing in Malcolm Zhang, a Swedish center back who has a super high potential. I believe that's the guy. So, that being said, they did end up landing. We mentioned Awaziem last recap episode, but Nico Giacchini coming back from Como, the former St. Louis and Orlando City striker. Yeah, I forgot he played for Orlando City for a minute. Goes over, plays 8 games in Serie B before moving back stateside on loan. Not to mention that Bupensta also got his contract terminated because I think he just stopped showing up. I think that was the rumor on the street, but striker in, striker out, lots of strikers linked, center back depth linked. Good window, bad window. How do we feel?
I mean, I'm gonna say bad window, but I
Ooh.
think they did a good job with a bad window. I'm saying bad window because I think that no, actually, I take that back. I don't want to say bad window. I think they recognized the places where they needed to make improvements, that being striker and center back. I think they brought in two good pieces in each of those areas. Well, one good piece in each of those areas. I guess the only thing that gives me pause from saying it's a great window is just considering the fact that it's, again, similar to Charlotte, where you rumored all these big names that have come in and make a huge impact on the team, like Bertarame and Sargent. And I don't know how realistic Sargent was, but even seeing like the Weston McKennie rumors and all that stuff. And, you obviously question like how realistic is this? Like, is in his prime Weston McKennie going to be coming over to play it for FCC? Like, probably not. Like, there's probably a small chance of it, but still, you mean you see the connections, you see the names, and they ended up with Awaziem and Gioacchini, who I think are good additions to the team. But I think someone like Bertarame, and you talked about it already as to like why that move didn't happen. That's out of FCC's hands. But yeah, adding him over Gioacchini, I think would be a much improved attack. Gioacchini, I think, did a good job with St. Louis. I think the question is going to be asked of what does he look like in the FCC system? I mean, I think a lot of strikers have done well. Kevin Kelsey has come in this year and he's done very well. So I wouldn't be I wouldn't be shocked if Gioacchini comes in and doesn't miss a beat. But I'll say it's a good window. But I think it could have been great.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a team that didn't need to add a lot. You needed the center back depth because of the injuries that you see. I think Matt Miazga is pretty much done for the year. Nick Hagland, same way. So you needed that center back depth just to give you some other options. Would have been nice to get Zhang in as well, sure. But getting at least one player in Awazian is I think a great pull for them. And then you look at the strikers, it's Kevin Kelsey, Corey Baird, Sergio Santos. You just had Bupens to go, right? Wasn't working out for you, was taking a DP spot. You needed to get somebody in the odd chance that Kevin Kelsey doesn't start performing for you, right? Yuya Kubo can fill into that role too, but you needed somebody else. So again, a notion of you missed out on Sargent, you missed out on Bertarame, who you were basically signed, sealed, delivered up until the 11th hour. The ability to get something like this over the line last minute, again, shows really good ambition for a team that's pushing for the top spot. But they didn't need to do a whole bunch else, right? I think their midfield's solid. They've got a lot of people who can play in that role. Orellano and Yedlin on either side of the wingback structure looks really, really good. They've got depth in those roles as well. I mean, it's a setup that has them as they should be 5 points off of Supporter Shield right now against a Miami team that is now going to be very, very thin to the end of the year without Messi for what seems to be even longer than initially anticipated. So I think they did a really good job, like you mentioned, finding things that they needed to sort out and then filling the role that they needed in a short amount of time. And again, I compare this to a Red Bull team that had 10 months to find a striker, and their only option was a Polish second division guy. And they were like, well, we tried. Like, I wish we were getting Giacchini on loan. Like, that would be a wonderful move for us.
My concern for FCC is kind of like their form going forward. Like, feels like they're just scoring tons of goals and their defense is kind of falling apart a bit. And I think that a lot of that is because of, as you said, there's injuries in the back and probably it'll take a little bit of time for guys to figure things out. But they're on three straight losses in the league before the Leagues Cup kicked off. And then in Leagues Cup, they played a couple of weaker Liga MX sides, and then against MLS sides, they won one and they lost one. They had I would say a good win against NYCFC 4-2, and then they lost 2-4 against Philly. So that's against MLS opponents, which is obviously who you're going to be playing against for the rest of the regular season and playoffs. They conceded 6 times in 2 games. And that's on top of the fact that they're on a 3-game losing streak in the league coming into the Leagues Cup. So they definitely needed to do something and kind of turn things around because I think they were heading in the wrong direction. I guess the jury's kind of still out on how much Awazium's going to be that difference maker in the back line because Leagues Cup, they were kind of hit or miss. They did well against the League MX teams defensively, but not against the MLS sides. But the attack seems to be firing off still. So I think only adding Gioacchini to that will be helpful, but it seems like maybe they still have some defensive issues that quite frankly, I don't know how you resolve those.
I mean, listen, if there's any coach that can figure out a way to do that, I think Pat Noonan can do that. I think he's figured out a way to make this team play for him, and just got to give him time to do that. So, one team that didn't miss on any moves, according to what we were tracking down, is Minnesota United, bringing in 6 different players this window. Kelvin Yeboah from Genoa, Jefferson Diaz, a center back from Millonarios, Samuel Shashua from Albacete Balompié, Matas Komet coming out of AS Trenson, Anthony Markinich, the right back from St. Louis, and finally designated player number 10, Joaquin Pereira from Club Atletico Tucumán. I mean, for a team that has been kind of just mid this year, they just looked at Eric Ramsey and said, here are your toys, go make it work, which is something that we, again, really, really good to see, bringing in a coach and saying, we're going to give you the tools to succeed if you can do it. And he's clearly shown that he can earn that trust and respect. And now he's got a lot of different options. Favorite move of the window for Minnesota?
This was the segment that I was excited to talk to you about because I think we're on different wavelengths when we talk about Minnesota, but we can get to the overall summary later. I guess I'll go with Kelvin Yeboah for my favorite move. I think he's got probably the strongest resume potentially out of all of them, depending on kind of how you look at things. I know Pereira is kind of the new designated player signing, but Yeboah's got good European experience to bring over across Serie A. I think that's the Austrian Bundesliga. Oh, but also it looks like the regular Bundesliga, Ligue 1. So he's got game time in the Europa League. I want to see how that translates over. His goal scoring record kind of iffy. I mean, I don't know how many of these are starts when they're showing appearances, but he's got about maybe somewhere between 30 and 40 goals out of roughly somewhere over 100 appearances. So I think there's potential upside there with a guy that's had a lot of European experience versus a bunch of guys that I think have come in from like a lot less known leagues other than Pereira, who's coming from the Argentinian league.
Listen, I am going to go with the Joaquin Pereira pick, as you mentioned, new designated player, a guy that they needed to replace Emmanuel Reynoso. And what I'm excited most about is, you've got Tani Oluwase, who is out here with 8 goals, 4 assists, and 17 appearances with, I mean, just bang average service, to be completely frank, right? I am so excited to see. Oh, St. John's boy. Pops will be happy about that. I am very excited to see what he can do with an actual number 10 behind him playing, setting him up properly. It'll be really, really excited to see how he gets on that way because I think Tani Oluwase is a just powder keg waiting to explode. Now you put the igniter onto the fuse, big boom incoming. So, no, big fan of the Pereira signing, and again, the ambition. We'll keep going back to it to be on the bubble, 2 points clear of the drop, and saying, okay, here are your players to bring us up the table. And if you look right now at the table, they're in ninth at 33 points, 2 wins, and they're up in fifth with some help. They're not far off of being really in the mix of this thing. And now they've got the reinforcements to do it. Now it's going to be one of those things where, okay, you've got 100 new players coming in. How fast you can get them to gel and merge, right? We talked about that a lot, but I love this move for the enemies of the pod. This window is great for them. And at the very least, if it doesn't make them, top five this season, it sets them up for a great 2025.
I mean, let me ask you this, I guess. How many of these guys do you think come in and are starters for this team?
I think Jefferson Diaz is a good rotation piece at the back. And again, you got Michael Boxall who's going to hold it down. Bakra has been kind of rolling through there. Yeah, Victor Eriksson is gone. He had sub appearances. He wasn't really a starting piece, right? So it's been Tapias, it's been Boxall kind of holding down that role. Now your rotation piece is gone. I think that Jefferson Diaz slides in and is that rotation piece. Zarek Valentin playing right back majority of the time. I'm not saying Komet comes in and is an instant starter, but again, depth and rotation for a deeper run, hopefully, this season. Pereira, I think, comes in and starts. They find a way to fit him in no matter what. Kelvin Yeboah as a striker, but I think, yeah, he can play on either wing as well. I think they find a way to fit him in as well. So 2 starting pieces, a rotation piece, and actually Shashua has already played a little bit already for the side. So yeah, they're going to find ways to utilize all of them. Maybe not in direct starting roles, but they'll get in there.
I mean, I've been looking in the background at a few of like the more underlying numbers, and I'm definitely more on board with Joaquin Pereira now that I've been kind of looking at it. He was top five in the Argentinian league last season in progressive passes and in key passes. So I think that's definitely a good addition, considering that that's I think a hole that they've been lacking in the midfield. Pairing him with Robin Lod, I think, will be good in terms of getting more playmaking opportunities for guys like Flongwane and Oluwasi. I'm not sold on the rest of them, to be honest. I feel like they're just kind of depth additions or guys coming over from like I think Minnesota is like a lot of these signings outside of maybe Pereira is just kind of them looking for diamonds in the rough. Whereas you look at FCC and you look at Charlotte and they're trying to bring in like bigger, like way bigger names in the prime of their careers versus Minnesota, who's bringing in somebody from like the Spanish second division or like the Slovakian first division and just, I don't know, I guess trying to hope that they've found like a cheap diamond in the rough that'll pan out. That just kind of feels like that's the direction that Minnesota's been going. I mean, they've got Moses Nyman, they had a Kaden Clark. Like it just feels like they're trying to find cheap pieces to add to the team and just cross their fingers and hope somebody pans out. I wish they would show a bit more like ambition to bring in a bigger name to add to this team because they have the space for it. Reynoso's gone now, right? And they haven't properly replaced it. Well, I guess now they have with Pereira, but outside of that, I feel like they still could have added more. I mean, you can I had the roster up for a second ago. I
Well,
think there was somebody.
while you do that,
Okay,
which big name star is willingly packing up their bags and moving to Minnesota in the United States to play in this league? And let
and
me rephrase that. Not this league, but play there in Minnesota.
I mean, people were rumored to Cincinnati. That's Cincinnati, Ohio. That's not LA. That's not New York. It was Charlotte, North Carolina as well. Are
Skyline
they
Chili.
are
Yeah.
they are they really that much like are we acting like Minnesota's like Siberia compared to these two?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is the perception could be that, right? When you look at Minnesota, your first thought is, isn't that where the United States played and everybody got frostbite because it was so damn cold?
Come on, you think the players playing over in Europe know anything about that? There's 0% chance they know about that.
Listen. Everybody there knows ball. They're European. They have to. That's the whole point of why we bring Europeans in because they know ball and we don't.
Don't shift your agenda point. I I pulled up the roster. So obviously the Reynoso spot was gone, and then they filled it with Pereira. Lillard is someone who is listed as can be bought down. They also had a U22 spot. I don't know if any of these signings filled that. I don't think so. So I don't know. I just feel I'm probably just being like too nitpicky, but I just like Diaz is on a struggling Colombian division team coming over. Like Komet's playing in the Slovakian division for like a mid-table Slovakian team, and then Shashua is coming over from like the Spanish second division, I think, maybe even third. Yaboa's got like very spotty game time in his time in Europe. I think Pereira might be the only one, in my opinion, that feels like a shoe-in to have some success here. I think the rest of them, you're kind of just hoping that you found that diamond in the rough.
Listen, I don't necessarily disagree with you, and I don't want to go on forever about this because we do have a couple things we need to close up here on. But it's for a team that is, I think again, going back to the main type, the main theme of this is ambition. For a team that is on the bubble that could either go out and make a bunch of signings that either prep them for next year or get ready to go, versus just sitting on and saying, okay, well, we're close, and that thrill in and of itself is going to make people want to show up and be a part of it, and we'll just make money that way. I think it's a good sign that they are going out and making those moves. So whether they hit or not, I feel like there is this idea that everybody expects a player that is going to come in and just be one of the most recognizable faces in the world, right? That doesn't happen here. You're not going to get these big signings where like, oh yeah, I've heard his name in transfer talks or on whatever, right? You have to find those diamonds more often than not. So,
I don't know. I mean, I think the league has kind of strayed away from that lately. I mean, I think
not I'm
the
not saying
last
it's
couple
every I'm not
windows,
saying it's every I'm not saying it's every move, but I'm saying like eventually like you can't just constantly go out and be like, "Oh yeah, like I'm going to get this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy," because you're going to miss out on most of them. So you have to be able to back it up with players who are up and coming. Right? Kelvin Yeboah played at Genoa in Serie A, a top 5 league. I think they in league. Yeah, they were in Serie A, right?
I mean, the first year he played there, they got relegated, and then he played in Serie B.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out. Wouldn't know because I don't watch the Italian league, but this is my point, right? Like you're not going to find players from the top part of the Italian league who are just going to up and leave, and this is a whole nother conversation because even though we know what our league is doing, people in Europe, and I think this is going to be this way for a long time, no matter what we do, look at our league as, yeah, I'll go there at the end of my career. It'd be nice to go there, right? It'd be nice to play there. They're doing something special, but I want to challenge myself in Europe because Europe is the premier destination, right? It's like when anybody plays basketball, no matter where you are, you want to get to the NBA because the NBA is where it's all at, right? It's the same sort of deal. So as much as I'd love to go out and be like, oh yeah, there's this guy who's playing, rotation minutes in the French league, right? Mid first division French league, right? that just because he's not getting a ton of minutes doesn't mean that he's not going to end up getting, just walking up and saying, "Yeah, I'll go to America now." Because in their mind that's still the highest level, and there are players who want to play there versus come here. And again, that's a mentality thing. You can't really change that no matter how much money you give them, but that's a conversation for another day. We can dive into that whole thing for an hour.
Yeah, but I mean, money talks. I mean, clearly teams have been able to pull guys from Europe I mean, like pretty decently or consistently over the last couple of windows. I mean, we got Kuipers, Musa, Yakumakis, just to name a couple. I mean, I
Well,
know
and
there's more.
I'm not saying you can't do it all the time, but I'm saying like to look at this window that they just did where they pulled in Yeboah, Pereira, Markinich, who's coming over as an MLS guy, and then some lower level European guys or South American guys in Diaz, and to be like, oh, this isn't a good window because I don't know any of them, I think is harsh.
I just
So
think there's a clear, distinct difference in ambition looking at a few other clubs versus like what Minnesota has been adding like the last two windows, where it's just I feel like low risk, like low risk, high reward because they're not really taking
yep,
many
that
chances on guys.
that's okay. I don't disagree with you there. The other thing I will say is you don't know what was going on in the background. Like,
Yeah,
Tommy Scoops can't share everything, right? So they could have had
why
their eye
not?
on
Get
some.
more phones, Tommy.
Well, listen, I'm not saying that he should. You are, but I'm not disagreeing with you.
Turn
You
this
know,
man into an
you know,
octopus. Give him 8 arms and 8 phones.
we
Get,
we
get
don't we
tweeting.
don't know exactly what he was pushing for, right? So got to take everything with a grain of salt. Now, I do want to just get on to because we've been going for a little bit here. I want to get on
Yeah.
to just some players who have left our league, players who were rumored, some came as a complete shock,